Hello, good morning. Come and join me. Bring snacks, bring drinks, get comfy in my little rectangle, and welcome. I would like to begin with a very simple concept. Basically, something isn't quite right with the way we're working. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think many of us can feel it. Something's changed. And I don't mean that work is hard, because work has always been hard. And I don't mean that people are lazy. I feel actually very strongly that this isn't the case. Certainly, the evidence suggests this is far from the truth. And I don't think that technology is the enemy. But somewhere between the tools that were meant to help us and the reality of using them, work has started to feel a little bit different. So let me ask you a question, a rhetorical question. When was the last time you genuinely finished work? And I'm not talking about shutting down your laptop. Some of us don't even do that. And not when you left the office or when your final meeting ended and that wave of relief comes over you. I mean proper finished, like nothing left to think about, nothing waiting for your attention. So no email sitting at the back of your mind, no Teams message that you're going to answer later, no document that you suddenly remember while making dinner and wonder if the track changes worked on it. Because for many of us, work no longer has an ending. It has a pause button, maybe. So maybe we've redefined what it means to be finished. Now, for most of its history, work was somewhere we went. And now, well, work has become something we carry. Like we carry it in our pockets, we carry it into the kitchen, we carry it into conversations with the people we love, and sometimes we carry it to bed where it waits patiently for us to wake up and check it again. And this is happening at a moment where our technology has never been more capable. We can collaborate across continents in seconds. We can find information instantly. We can automate tasks, analyze data. I mean, we can ask artificial intelligence to help us write, create, and solve problems. By almost every measure, we should be working smarter than ever before. So, why do so many people feel as though they are working harder simply to kind of stay still? Over the past year, I've spoken with people working in facilities management, local government, education, healthcare, finance, technology. So completely different organizations, totally different professions and different job titles. But I do keep hearing the same things. Things like, I'm busy all day, but I don't feel as though I've moved anything forward. Or I spend more time searching than doing. I'm constantly switching between things. And then the classic, I finished the day exhausted, but I can't really explain what exhausted me. And the thing is, these are not people who lack resilience, and they aren't people who are resistant to change. Many of them absolutely love their work and are very motivated by it. So I stopped asking whether people needed to become better at managing modern work, and I'd started asking whether modern work itself just needed to be better designed. Now, we are really good at connecting people. I'm not entirely convinced that we're as good at helping them like thrive at work or flourish. And that is why this week exists. We've called it Digital Wellbeing Week, but if I'm honest, I sometimes wonder whether that name is a bit too small, because what we're talking about is not like a collection of well-being tips. It's not an initiative. We're talking about work. The work that we're creating, the systems we're building. Importantly, it's about the expectations that we're normalizing. And it's really about the experience of being a human inside all of that. So over the next 5 days, we're going to investigate that experience together. The plan is we're going to hear from researchers and practitioners, leaders, people on the front line, people building technology, essentially anyone brave enough to question the status quo. And we're going beneath the headlines. We're going beyond the productivity statistics. We're definitely getting past the latest app updates, platform announcements, and the generic insipid AI conversations that I tend to see. The important thing is to challenge the assumptions. We're going to test ideas. We might even disagree from time to time, which is great. That is where the growth is. And by Friday, I hope you will see your own working life just that little bit differently. And it's not because we're going to give you all the answers. We're not. But because once you begin to notice patterns, they become very difficult to unsee. And that's what's emerging, these working patterns. Millions of people spend most of their waking lives at work, and that makes work one of the most important systems we've ever built. Surely it's worth getting right. So let's crack on. If something isn't quite right with the way that we're working, how did we get here? Well, I think there's a temptation to believe that it must have been a single moment. It comes down to a single decision, a single piece of technology, a point where somebody somewhere got it wrong. But of course, history's not that tidy. The workplace experience today wasn't designed, it emerged. And that's a really important distinction, because let's be honest, nobody ever gathered in the boardroom and said, okay, everyone, here's our plan. Let's create a world where people communicate through 6 different platforms. They attend meetings to prepare for other meetings. They'll carry work around in their pockets at all times and occasionally forget why they opened their laptop in the first place. Nobody wanted that. But equally, nobody wanted the opposite either. 25 years ago, work wasn't some golden age. If you wanted to send someone a document, you often printed it. And if you forgot a file on the way to work, you drove back to the office to get it, or back home to get it. If you needed to speak to somebody in another country, you had to coordinate your timelines. You looked at your watch, you picked up the phone, and you hoped for the best connection you could get. So we've solved thousands of genuine problems, and that's the point. Every step along this journey made sense. It's not like it was one revolution. It was more a series of sensible evolutions. So the first digital workplace arrived without much drama. Paper became documents, letters became email, our filing cabinets became shared drives, and for the first time, information could move faster than the people. And that's what changed work forever. After that came the connected workplace. The internet stopped being somewhere that we visited as a point of fun. It became the place where work happened. Suddenly your team wasn't just the people sitting next to you or nearby. It could be people in another building or another city, another country, another continent, you know. Knowledge became easier to find. Collaboration became easier to start because distance became less important. Then came the smartphone. And I think this may have changed work more than anything that came before it, but that's up for debate. So something profound happened when work stopped living in a place. It stopped living on a computer, and it started living in our pocket, but more than that, in our heads. And for the first time in that history, work could tap us on the shoulder wherever we happened to be. And that's whether we're waiting at the train station or on a train, watching TV, standing in the supermarket, or even on a beach in Barbados. Now, it's not that anyone expects us to answer necessarily. It's just simply because now we can. And then something even bigger happened. Work stopped waiting. Messages arrive instantly, documents update continuously, projects evolve in real time. And questions, they don't sit in the inbox anymore, waiting until tomorrow morning for that check. Everything became live. Everything became connected. Everything became possible all of the time. And then, of course, the pandemic. Almost overnight, organisations achieved years of digital transformation, an extraordinary achievement, don't get me wrong, but understandably, what we didn't have time to do was redesign work. We just digitised it. So the meetings stayed, they simply moved into our little rectangles on our screens. And now, here we are, finally arrived at the next chapter. Feel like a bit of drama's needed here. Artificial intelligence. And not simply another tool, despite that being the most commonly spouted idea and phrase that you'll hear, but another change in what it means to create, analyze, decide, and solve problems. So once again, work is evolving. Now, this is what fascinates me. Every one of those changes solved a real problem. None of them were mistakes. Each one made work faster or more flexible, more connected, and increased capability. So where did the friction come from? And I think it's because gradual change is remarkably difficult to notice while you're living through it, right? Nobody wakes up on a Tuesday morning and discovers they're working in a completely different world because the changes are small. They're too sensible, nothing to argue against. It's incremental until one day you look around and you realize you've inherited a workplace that nobody ever consciously designed. It's like a little city. Every decade, somebody builds another road or another bridge, another railway. Next thing you know, you've got a massive new housing estate. Every decision solves a problem. Every addition improves something. But eventually, without things like city planning, the traffic doesn't quite make sense anymore. Now, nobody designs congestion. Congestion emerges, and maybe that's what the modern workplace is heading towards. We didn't build today's way of working, we arrived here. Like I said, it's one sensible decision at a time, one improvement at a time, one innovation at a time, which leaves us with a very important question. What has that journey actually done to the experience of work? Now, fortunately, for once, we don't have to rely on opinion. Over the last few months, we've been gathering evidence from researchers, organisations and practitioners around the world. So let's see what they've found. Now, I said earlier that something didn't feel quite right about modern work, but intuition isn't evidence. Feelings and vibes are not evidence. And as everyone who knows me knows, I believe strongly, anecdotes aren't evidence. So I decided to stop asking people what they thought and start looking into exactly what the evidence is saying. I didn't go looking for any particular conclusion, but I did have ambitions of finding the truth, if you like. And at first, I thought I'd find loads of different opinions because these reports came from completely different worlds. We've got Microsoft, we've got Gallup, Cisco, HiBob, we've got academic psychologists, we've got information coming out of facilities management. So different industries, different priorities, totally different agendas. Surely there's going to be disagreement, but no. Instead, they all started pointing in the same direction, not with the same stats necessarily, and not all of them used the same kind of language, but the underlying story was the same. Let me talk you through some of the discoveries. So discovery one, the first clue came from HiBob, which is an HR software company. Ostensibly, it was about AI, but it wasn't that caught my attention. It was pressure. Because their research found that 58% of UK workers say pressure in their role has increased over the last 2 years. Nearly half feel expected to be available at all times. And also nearly half finish most working days mentally exhausted. Now, it wasn't those numbers that were a surprise. What surprised me was that HiBob had this conclusion that it wasn't the always-on culture that was the problem. It's just a symptom of something much deeper. So, as is my way, new question, if people are under this much pressure, how is the work still getting done? Discovery two. So that question led me to Gloria Mark, a psychologist who spent decades studying interruptions. And one experiment completely changed and overturned what I thought I knew. Basically, she interrupted people while they were working. So I would expect productivity to collapse, but it didn't. People actually completed the work faster. The quality didn't significantly change until you started looking underneath it all, because stress increased, frustration increased, time pressure increased, and mental effort increased. And I remember reading that twice because, quite frankly, it didn't make sense to me at the time. But then it clicked, right? The productivity hadn't disappeared. The cost had just moved, and it moved into the person, the individual. And that single idea has completely changed how I think about productivity. Moving on to discovery 3, by this point, I'd stopped blaming technology entirely. And instead, I kind of wondered, what if people are adapting faster than the organizations they work in? And that's when the Microsoft Work Trend Index for 2026 landed in my lap. One sentence jumped off the page at me, and it said, in many cases, people are ready, the systems around them are not. So maybe it's not a productivity problem. Maybe it's not an AI problem. Maybe it's a design problem. So Microsoft argues that organizational conditions, what's going on in an organization, have a greater influence on successful AI outcomes than individual effort. So maybe we've reached the point where asking more from people isn't the answer. Perhaps it's time that the systems needed to catch up with the people. Okay, discovery 4. Gallup then filled in another missing piece for me. If organizations need to change, who's actually going to make that happen? Well, as it turns out, managers. Gallup found that 65% of employees say AI has improved their own productivity, but only 12% believe it's transformed how work happens across their organization. So the technology is helping individuals, but somehow that improvement isn't becoming organizational improvement. Technology, therefore, doesn't really spread through software or applications or the tech that we're rolling out. It spreads through people. Which brought me to discovery 5. Cisco asked the question none of the other reports had asked, and I was really pleased to see it there. How do we even know whether work is getting better? Let's think about the data we've got, right? We've got occupancy, desk bookings, emails, Teams messages, meeting room utilization, and we measure them because we can. But as this report pointed out, quite right, someone sitting in a collaboration space isn't necessarily collaborating, because presence isn't participation, activity isn't effectiveness, and that's because data isn't understanding. Now, Cisco's workplace experts believe that 69% of the information that they actually wanted and would be useful to them wasn't being measured at all. And some of the things that matter most, things like belonging, judgment, trust, recovery, purpose, they're also the hardest things to count or measure. So, after months and months of reading all of these reports, all of this research, what did I actually learn? Well, not that work is broken, or that technology is bad, or that AI is either the problem or our salvation. Instead, I found it a lot more interesting because what we uncovered is a gap between the way humans are now capable of working and the way that many organizations are still designed. It's not a well-being problem, and it's not a technology problem. It's a design problem. And that's really encouraging because, unlike human nature, design can change. So if we've just spent the last 20 minutes understanding how we got here, perhaps the next question is the more exciting one. If work has been designed, how are we going to redesign it? How might that look? But then I did realise after reading all of it, all of the reports and the research, that the problem wasn't simply that work had changed. It was really that the way I was thinking about work hadn't. I think we've inherited a set of assumptions about work that did make sense, perfect sense for a different world. And because they made sense for so long, we've stopped questioning them. But perhaps that's the biggest risk of all. And so I want to take you through what I think are the key misunderstandings. First, we thought communication creates connection. It doesn't. Communication moves information from A to Z. Connection creates relationships, and those are very different things. One can happen without the other. Second misunderstanding, we thought productivity creates progress. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it just creates more productivity. If we're brilliantly efficient at doing work that doesn't matter, We haven't progressed. We've accelerated, and those aren't the same thing either. Misunderstanding 3. We thought activity proves value. Emails, meetings, messages, occupancy, utilization, they are all useful proxies, but they're still proxies. The easier something becomes to measure, the easier it is to mistake it for success. Misunderstanding 4. We thought digital maturity creates digital well-being. It doesn't. You can deploy extraordinary technology and still leave people exhausted. Technology changes capability, but it doesn't automatically improve experience. Misunderstanding 5. We keep asking people to become more resilient. Almost all our interventions nowadays is about that. But what if resilience has become a substitute for actually redesigning the work environment? Now, don't get me wrong, resilience is a wonderful quality and it should help us survive in exceptional circumstances. It shouldn't become the permanent operating system of modern work. Now, none of these misunderstandings appeared overnight. Every one of them made sense until the world changed. And that's why I don't think this keynote is really about digital well-being. It's about learning to see the work differently. Because once you stop confusing communication with connection, activity with value, productivity with progress, and digital maturity with digital well-being, everything else starts to look different too. Now, maybe work hasn't become too complicated. I have a theory that we've just been using the wrong map. And when your map no longer matches the landscape, it really doesn't matter how hard you walk, you're still going to end up lost. So if we've misunderstood the map, what kind of decisions have we been making because of that? And most importantly, who's been living with those consequences? That's where I'd like to go next. Because one of the things I realised while I was researching this keynote is that organisations aren't really making bad decisions. They're just making difficult ones. Every workplace decision solves one problem and creates another. It's the nature of systems. Every choice has consequences. Some of them are visible, some of them are hidden. And although we have no problem celebrating the benefits of our decisions when they're recognisable, I think we're much less comfortable talking about the trade-offs. Let me take you through those trade-offs and see how you feel about them. Trade-off 1, let's start with flexible working. It's basically transformed millions of lives. Parents spend more time with their children, yay. People with disabilities have greater access to work, yay. Commuting has reduced, yay. People do report that they've found more time to think, yay. But every gain has a trade-off. So if you're just starting your career, where do you hear the conversations that teach you how the organisation really works? Where do friendships begin? And where do mentors notice your potential? So flexibility solved one problem. It also created another. Trade-off 2, think about communication. We've built really cool tools, don't get me wrong, but if communication becomes effortless, interruption often becomes effortless too. Gloria Mark's research reminds us that people absorb interruption, they speed up, and they compensate until the cost becomes stress, effort, and fatigue at an individual level. The tool isn't the problem. The trade-off is forgetting that every message enters someone else's attention. Trade-off 3, this is it. Think about AI. AI can remove repetitive work. It can improve accessibility. It can generate ideas. It can accelerate analysis of data. But every opportunity asks another question. If AI writes the first draft, when do we learn to write? If AI summarises every meeting, what effect does that have on our ability to listen? And if AI always provides the answer, When do we get to wrestle with uncertainty? So technology changes capability, absolutely, but capability isn't the same thing as wisdom. Which brings me to trade-off 4, measurement. Every metric shines a light in one direction but leaves another in shadow. The easier something is to count, the easier it is to value. Now, trust, belonging, judgment, purpose, they don't matter less just because they're hard to measure. Last trade-off. We spent ages trying to create the workplace as though there was one employee and one experience, but there's no such thing as the employee experience. There are thousands of them. Every person walks into the same organization and experiences a different workplace. So maybe we need to stop this idea of I work in the best workplace or I work in the worst workplace, and actually start asking, honestly, like, what trade-offs are we willing to make and for whom? Every organisation is already making those choices, whether they realise it or not. And facilities management, they sit right in that merged space between people, place, technology, behaviour, efficiency, experience, cost, and care. At its best, FM is stewarding the conditions in which good work becomes possible. So, the future of work won't necessarily be defined by the organisations with the most technology, the most data, or the most fancy AI tools. It will be defined by the organisations that become the most thoughtful about the trade-offs they choose to make. Good work isn't created by eliminating trade-offs. It's created by making those trade-offs consciously, openly, and with the humans inside the system firmly in mind. And if I've learned one thing while we're preparing this keynote, it's that I'm far more optimistic about the future of work than I was when I started, which might be slightly surprising. But after everything that we've explored, you might be forgiven for expecting a rather gloomy conclusion, but I have arrived at a very uplifting conclusion, because every single challenge that I've talked about today has one thing in common. None of it's inevitable. Every single workplace you've ever worked in, every policy, every process, every expectation, it was designed by people. And if people can design work, they can redesign it. So it doesn't mean that there's a perfect workplace waiting to be discovered. Work is ultimately that gorgeous little cliche. It's about people, and people are wonderfully, frustratingly variant and different. And so our goal is to build workplaces that keep learning, that stay curious, that adapt, because designing work isn't something you finish, it's just something that you keep on doing. And I realised towards the end of my research that I'm really trying to answer quite a broad question, which is, what is work actually for? If we get the answer to that question wrong, then every technology decision, every workplace decision, and every AI decision starts moving us in the wrong direction. And I used to think that it's okay, better workplaces will come when we have better answers. But now, nope. Our salvation comes from asking better questions. We've got to move from how do we make people more productive to what kind of work deserves to become more productive. Got to move away from this, how quickly can we deploy AI, and start thinking, where does AI genuinely improve human work? And where should human judgment remain essential? Let's stop trying to persuade people back into the office and start saying, right, what experiences are so valuable that people would actually choose to come together? Because the questions change first and the workplaces change afterwards. I'd really like to ask just one thing of you this week. Don't listen for the answer you expected. Listen for the question that you hadn't thought to ask. Those are the moments that change us. Those are the moments that change organisations. And so those are the moments that will reshape the way we work. So welcome to Digital Wellbeing Week. Thank you so much for your time. It's great to have you here, and enjoy the rest of the week. I really, really hope to hear your thoughts on the content that we cover. Thanks very much.